Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. Important stuff to talk about today for anybody, whether it's you or somebody you know who is a caregiver. A lot of responsibility, taking care of a loved one. Even more challenging when people give you their advice or critique you. How do you cope with that? How do you navigate through that? It can be hurtful. It can be challenging. Be great if you had that thick skin and you just let it bounce off you. Easier said than done, but lots of things we can learn here today from our caregiving coach. That's what she does, gives advice to others. And she's back with us. Marika Humphreys is on the program. How you doing today?
I am doing well, and getting sort of into the holiday spirit, which is crazy. Like, again, I know we talked about this last time, I think, but we're like in holiday season now, like full on. I feel
Yeah,
like the weather has finally changed now. It's gotten colder and rainier here in Washington, which is so, yeah. But you're starting to see the Christmas stuff out, and like, I'm like, holy cow, that's gonna just, it's gonna go by so quick.
I know. I'm so not ready. Like I just saw, I passed my house yesterday, full on lights and decorations and display. I mean, I'm like, oh,
Really?
what? We didn't even put the,
Wow.
and you know, it's really fun. They repurposed a Halloween decoration, like a 10-foot tall skeleton. And I think they took it from skeleton and by adding a scarf and a couple of things, turned it into, I think it's Nightmare Before Christmas or
Oh
something.
yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
characters there. So very
Yeah.
crafty, very, very, but
That is.
it's Christmas. It's a holidays already. Not ready. Not
No.
ready.
I did see a lot of those like 10-foot tall skeletons. Those are like the new thing.
They are the new
So
thing.
apparently
Right.
they do need to be repurposed because
Mm.
I think there's a ton of them out there all over the country now.
Right. I mean, all the work it goes into putting them up, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I gotta assume that it's got to have, you know, stakes in the ground because it can move with
I
the wind and
know.
everything like that. So yeah,
I
get a
know.
ladder and put a scarf on it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
well, even
Exactly.
more so as we head into the holidays, where you're probably going to be coping with more comments when it comes to caregiving.
Yes.
Where do you want to start with that today?
Yes, that's a good point because the holidays is usually when we get together with the family members that we don't see all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
as we know, our family members like to have opinions. Family members can be challenging. I just heard a great quote, and I'm gonna not say it exactly, but it was so funny. It basically the quote was, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so true
Mm.
because they will challenge you. There's some member will challenge you.
Oh, hands out.
Um,
By the way, side note here, let's all be honest. Let's really get it out there. Anybody that walks around saying, I have no problems with my family. Everything is fantastic. We always get along. There's never any issues. You're just not being truthful with anybody, including yourself. It's just impossible. There's always going to be something along the way, some more than others. And it's going to be personality conflicts. There's going to be things you got to navigate through, right?
yeah, yeah, and so we talked a little bit last time about how it's easy to give caregivers. When we're supporting a caregiver, we want to often give them advice. And so this week, I wanted to talk about the reverse of that, or not the reverse of that, but the other side of that. From the caregiver's perspective, you will get lots of opinions from people, from sometimes from friends, coworkers, family members, and sometimes those opinions are welcome, sometimes they're not, but overall, people will have opinions about your decisions. Maybe you and your level, you might be a care partner and you're helping to make care decisions, or a full on caregiver and you're making a lot of decisions on your own. So people are going to have opinions about that, how much you're doing or how little you're doing. Like the level to which you're doing whatever your responsibilities are or that you've taken on in caregiving, people are going to have opinions about that. How you're doing it, people will have opinions about all the things, and that can be challenging. Like you said, sometimes it can be um make you, it can be hard to just hear, or Or, and I was thinking about this, I think people tend to have two responses. Either someone gives you an opinion that you didn't ask for in some form about something around your caregiving. And I think some people either they start to doubt themselves and kind of, question their own decisions. Or on the other side, I think the other type of response that we tend to have is total rejection outright. Like they don't know what I'm doing. They don't know what I'm facing. Screw them. They don't understand, and kind of shutting down or sealing themselves off from, that opinion. And I think are both have their downside. In the first case, when you start to doubt yourself, I mean, the downside is doubting. Like as a caregiver, you have to find trust in yourself and have to be willing to trust that you know what's right and best. But at the same time, we also don't have all the answers, or we can't see all the perspectives. And so when we reject other people's opinions outright and kind of shut them down, or like at least shut them down in our mind, we also cut ourselves off from another perspective and potentially some more wisdom. So I think the ideal way is somewhere in between, and being willing to listen and still know that you can make your own choice.
Hmm.
But that can be challenging.
What do you do when somebody offers unsolicited advice? Is there some phrases that you can use um, tactfully to accept the information and advice and then just move on?
Yeah, I think oh, that's a good point. I'll think about that. Like that's a great one to I think always just acknowledging someone's opinion, and you can say, "Oh, let me think about that," or you make a good point. And I think that's a great place to notice if you feel defensive at all. Um, because if you want to start arguing like, well, you just don't understand or something, that's usually a sign that there's probably something inside you that is either afraid they might be right, or like quite, potentially doubting your own self. And so you don't want to hear anybody kind of question your own decisions. So I think if you notice a real desire to if you feel defensive, I think that's actually something to pay attention to. And it doesn't necessarily mean you say, oh, you're so right or whatever, but I think it's a clue into, hey, maybe this is something I should think about a little more. Because usually we get defensive when there's an element of truth to what someone has said that we think ourselves, right? And it's not so much what they say, but if we think there's any bit of truth to that, it's worth looking into that for yourself.
Hmm. Yes, but I also feel too that you are doing all of this over here, and then this person just comes along and throws a comment. Now, maybe
Sure.
there's a good suggestion in that, and you can react to
Yeah.
any,
Yeah.
accordingly if you so choose. Yeah, I never thought of that. Thank you. But if it's just a me, basically one of those you're thinking to yourself, oh yeah, you do it. How come? Where are you? You're visiting for the holidays. You're coming from another state. I don't see you offering any help. This
Yeah.
is inside my mind.
Yeah.
I'm the one
Yeah.
receiving that. Um, I don't ask you for your advice either.
Yes.
Is there phrases that we can use just to say basically thank you with a
Thank you, but no thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
poker face on?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think yeah, I hear your point in the sense that it is
Maybe that's
hard.
it. Maybe that's as simple as it is. I
I
hear
hear
your
your
point.
point.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hear because you're not saying anything uh good or bad.
Yeah.
Just me. You were heard.
Yeah.
I hear
Yeah.
your point. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's if you want to shut it down, that is a great way, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I gotta
Yeah.
remember that. I,
Yeah.
I think when you said it, you weren't even thinking about saying it, but you were saying it.
Well, and I do think, there's a couple different ways. Like the scenario you described are, I think we all know we have those maybe members. We're going to pick on the family a little bit since it's the holiday or coming up to the
Sure.
holidays. And so we definitely have those family members who will do that, right? Who will just sort of nitpick and come in and off their opinion. And it's not a genuine anything. It's just, you know, so I do think knowing that, I think that's a great strategy actually, is to, especially when you're going to some sort of family event where you think you might encounter other people's opinions that you're not really like not necessarily interested in hearing, just to prep yourself for they're going to have opinions, and have the ready phrase at hand, like, oh, good point, I'll think about that, or thanks,
Mm,
and then
yeah.
walk away, and I'm going to go, get something to
We,
drink.
you just
um,
reminded me of, I hear your point. If you tweak it just a little bit, it sounds like you're agreeing with them, but you're technically not. I hear what you're saying.
yeah,
So it almost
yeah,
sounds like you're embracing it. Basically, you're
yeah,
saying, I heard your point,
yeah,
and thank you.
yeah. And to that point, right, most people want acknowledgement, like,
Yes.
in conversation when we interact, and this is probably a larger problem we have in society right now, is we're
Yeah.
not really hearing the other side, we're not really hearing each other.
Mm,
So when we can all probably practice just acknowledging what someone says, acknowledging the point. So that's what we're doing when we say, I hear
yeah.
your point, or, oh, yeah, thanks for offering that. You
Yeah.
might be thinking, I wasn't asking, I don't really want your opinion. But, you can, when we feel acknowledged, often that's enough for people. Like,
Mm.
okay, they
People
heard
just
me.
want to
And
be
yeah,
heard.
people just want to be heard. Right.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
challenging, though, because people can say some mean things, or things that are just hurtful while you're doing the best you can to take care of
Yes.
somebody.
Yes. And I think that's the deeper thing here, is if you feel that defensiveness come up, I think really looking for your own self, right? And this has nothing to do with them anymore. Then it's about, why does that bother me so much? I mean, sometimes it's just that member of the family that you maybe have a history of, and that, kind of always ruffles your feathers. But other times it's, we do have internal doubts. I think that's why often that's so triggering for
Mm,
people, is because inside, and especially for caregivers, there is always doubt. Am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing?
sure.
Am I being too selfish, or am I, whatever, neglecting myself? I mean, there's always these questions. And so I think it is worthwhile to think, why does that bother me so much?
Mm,
And because there's a deeper message there, if you're willing to find it. And so
y-
a combination of things, right? Kind of prepping yourself for
yeah.
the relative that is going to push your buttons in advance, and know they're going to do that, and have a kind of a go-to phrase. um, but also maybe just, recognizing that, yeah, this brings up the doubts that I have about myself, and that can be okay. We all have doubts about all sorts of things. Like, none of us know at any one point how things are going to turn out, and if we're doing the right thing, but we can trust and kind of check in, or do we feel like we're making the right decisions?
Right. Yeah. It's a good point, because it's, we want to think that they're annoying, but they may be a mirror. They may be
Yeah.
giving you a view of something you're not seeing from where you are. So I guess, de depending on who it is, because some relatives are just,
Yes. Sure.
um,
Yeah. Consider the source, right? I
consider
think
the
that's the
source.
Yeah, I think that's the because there are a lot of people. I was just thinking about this recently, where I did this, and it was where I was really afraid to, it was actually my dad, to talk to my dad about a decision I'd made. And it wasn't around caregiving, but I was realizing that the reason I was afraid to bring it up is because, and he's a type that has a lot of opinions, but I also know he cares, and he's smart, and he often has very, a good perspective. But sometimes he will not shy away from giving you his opinion. Let's just say that, right? So it's somebody that whose opinion I value, and on the other hand, sometimes I don't always want. And I thought about it. I'm like, why am I so reluctant to bring this up? And part of it was because I I was doubting my own opinion. And I think we sometimes forget that we still get to choose, So if you are the caregiver, yeah, you still get to, you're the one doing the work, right? You're the one showing up. It's still your choice. And so if you can be open to other people's perspectives, especially when they're hard to hear, you may learn something, and it's a good chance to reflect and go, do I like my choices? And reaffirm that for yourself, or think out, oh, I don't feel great about this one thing, and that's the mirror that was just reflected to me. Sometimes
Mhm.
we suppress those things or bury them down, and it's all just about, it's an opportunity to kind of check back in with ourselves, but a reminder that I still get to choose. It's still me, and I can trust myself, but I also don't know everything, and I don't, I think checking in is good as well.
When you start doubting yourself, how do you recover from that?
I think liking your reasons. Like, what are my reasons for, why I do this or the way I'm doing things? Really, like, you can make a list. I'm doing it for these reasons or because of
Hmm.
this. And then you got to sit back and say, do I like those reasons? I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes that is, I love thinking about that because we don't often think about, we don't um, judge our reasons. And when we realize, oh, like, I'm not doing something, I didn't want to bring that topic up with my dad because I was afraid of his response. That's not a great reason that I feel proud about, right? So we often don't do things, or we're pushed around by our emotions in a way that's not helpful, out of fear, out of you know, so I'm also like, I don't love confrontation as well. So I will notice that that will impact my actions, fearing a confrontation. When the best thing is, I just need to have a difficult conversation. That might be what I need to do, but I don't want to do it because it could be uncomfortable. So that's the invitation to, I think, to
Hmm.
regain trust in yourself is discover your reasons and ask yourself if you like them. And if you don't, that's then you've got to go to work on maybe either changing your actions or figuring out, what how to deal with what is pushing you around.
So I'm in a men's group. I think I shared with you. I've been doing about 6 months now. Very impactful. And one of the major things that's often said is keep your emotions out of it. Try to remove your emotions because it can cloud what's going on. And now, like for example, if you make that list, what this is what I'm doing, why am I doing it? Kind of just make
Yeah.
make out keeping score, pros and cons, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And well, that's another part of it. Seeing it in front of you
Yeah.
gives you clarity, even journaling,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. But trying to keep the emotions out of it may be impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the first step to that is recognizing where the emotions are showing up,
Mm,
what those are, because keeping it out of it, like, that's hard to do. That's really hard to do. So we first have to be able to see, oh, okay, like, again, my fear of confrontation is just a discomfort around, um, you know, having a difficult conversation.
yeah.
That I have to see that first in order to keep it from influencing me. But I think it's a great way to think about it. Like, what are the emotions here? And then, and then recognizing, like, okay, that's often a lot of the emotions we have that we're afraid of or don't like are ones that we've probably struggled with our whole life. They tend to chase us around. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it as well. Is kind of separate the actions and then what are my emotions around it.
And especially when that relative comes along and is just making that comment that wasn't solicited. It's could be
Yes.
mean-spirited. You just to help you deflect or make it roll off you even better. Just
Yes.
like take the
Yeah.
emotion out of your response. Just
Yes.
yeah, it's a great
Yes.
point. Thanks.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yes. And I think preparing in advance, especially around holiday gatherings, like, that is the best way, because in the moment we are often like, you will be annoyed or irritated. or frustrated or angry. You will feel that.
Sure.
And if you have something planned to say, that's going to make it so much easier. And then taking that half second beat to take a breath, pause, not just respond, like, react, but then pull out your your ready-made response.
Mm-hmm. I often put it through the 3-phase filter, and that's email, especially text, all of that. Even right now, I have a situation. I wrote a text out. I saved it as a draft. I'm going to get back to it, give it 48 hours. But is it kind? Is it
Yes.
important? Is it necessary?
Yes.
Yeah, just to filter. Think of it for a second in that term.
So great.
Is it
just kind? I love that. I love that. I'm going to write that down. I know you've shared that before, but I'm going to write it down.
I pilot by it. I try to remember it, and I'm have to go back to that the text I have, because it's could be the ending of a relationship, so I want to carefully position it and take the emotion out of it. But there are reasons.
Yes.
But I have to put it through that filter. No reason you can't be kind.
Yes. And I think that's such a good point, especially with text these days, because people fire off texts and it can be emotion or a relationship ending.
Yeah. Because it's so easy. It's press.
Yes.
You don't even give it the thought. When you send an email, maybe there's another measure of let me just scan through typos, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then certainly on the fly, it's hard to do the the 3-phase filter when somebody walks in and says something. But to your point, I think it's the best one ever. Take a second.
Yeah.
The pause is powerful in that it allows you to think for a moment. And even if they said something to you, don't reply right away. It makes them feel better. Like you listen to them and you're processing it as opposed to flying off the handle. What you're really doing is you're processing, taking a second, taking a breath.
Yes.
And it feels like it's a year that pause lasts, and it can only be like 3 seconds, and that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I'm gonna share that around as well.
Yeah, it's stuff I learned. I learned from you, and even what we said before. It's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then walk away.
And then just walk away with that smile.
Walk away.
And always say thank you. Just thank him for it. I appreciate it. Doesn't mean I'm going to do anything about it. Doesn't mean I agree with you, but thank you. And how do we navigate this if somebody's going through some of these challenges or some of the other challenges that come along with caregiving? How do we find you?
You can find me on my website, coachmarika.com. And you can set up a consultation with me, find my podcast there as well. And my story is on there as well, my own caregiving story.
Yeah. And thank you for reminding of us that, because you went through a journey and there were ups and downs, and you've identified there some self-doubt at some times, and everything that we talk about here, you dealt with it.
Yes.
You did.
Yes, absolutely. And I see it with my clients all the time as well.
Yeah.
These are common caregiving challenges.
Appreciate you, and appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.